So, guys, I want to do another video today, and I want to talk about the time that me and my brother were asked to spend $400 on Mother's Day brunch. And, part of these videos, what I want to do is I want to talk about, the positives, the negatives, what could have been done better. And I understand, family's perfect. But what happened was that in my early 20s, no, in my early 20s, my parents were trying to teach me more responsibility. I had a job. I was making like $70 a week, and then I worked at another job and I was making like, $4,000 a month. And my parents just wanted me to kind of like have more of a coming of age, what you are going to gain more family responsibilities. So, what happened was that my grandmother would always buy us on Mother's Day. She would always, pay for the bill at at a restaurant. Like we would go out for a rest, we would go out to eat. She would always pay for it, and and my dad always felt very very embarrassed because he kind of felt like okay, um, she she's being taken advantage of or whatever really. And sometimes families will do something where they'll be like, you know what, even though even though it's my holiday or my birthday, I still want to treat the family really nice, and that was how my grandmother was. I insist. That was her personality, really. So I remember, like maybe one year, my dad was just he was just disgruntled that she would do that. So he kind of was asking me, my brother, to pay the bill, and he was saying stuff like, you guys got good jobs, you need to learn how to budget, you guys are doing it. And I remember me and my brother just like kind of looking at each other like, what the fuck, really? Because you're expecting us to come up with $200 on the spot, really, and like go to the ATM and whatever, really. Like he was kind of like, what, really putting it on us, really. And there's a lot of like, problems with that. I think that first of all, telling two people, what, you got to pay for the whole family on the spot, that does feel like a little bit of a fuck you. Like there's no preparation. Like for example, I'm going to San Francisco in a few weeks. I'm planning to go to Montreal. I'm going to a bunch of AEW shows because I do travel videos. I'm writing my plan of what I'm doing in San Francisco. And I got to do that for a couple other places. I'm going to Nashville for the 250th, and I'm doing a travel video there. So, what happens is then I got to change my money. I got to change my plans. I have to see how much money I'm paying back Wesley and other people. I have to change a lot of things about my finances because, every dollar I make, I have to pay attention to. Yes, there is hundreds of dollars that I usually do fuckery with my paychecks. I'm gonna admit that. And if I was in a situation where I had to pay for a bill for my family and just not do as much fuckery or whatever with my money, no problem really. But there are some situations where every dollar counts really. But the other part of it that I would have to say about it is, like that's a lot of money, $200 on the spot really. Or like, okay, you know what? I don't care about your personal plan. I don't care about whatever you pay, really. And then there's also kind of that bad thing, too, really, is that I'll share this. I make $48,000 a year at my job. But when I work overtime, but they're cutting down the overtime, I make around $90,000 a year. So it kind of comes down to that issue of, well, Byron makes $90,000. So Byron has to cover the family, really. Or my brother he has a girlfriend, I mean, my brother got married. Congratulations. So if they decide to have a child, I got to pay for the hospital bill, or I got to give them $5,000 in a bond or a stock, really, to make sure that kid can graduate, can have like a future, really. So, some families do that, and some families, don't do that, or some families will be like, okay, now you got the job, now you got to be paying for everybody, really, and sometimes that's a very very bad thing because you look at Michael Jackson and how one of the reasons why he did the Victory Tour was because his brothers wanted to make money off of him. Really, they all had like they all made like over $5 million to so that kind of took care of them for a while. Really, instead of just Michael Jackson doing the Thriller Tour. So there's times where families will be like, hey, you got something good going on. You need to pay for the family, really. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit. I think one problem it teaches is to allow yourself to be taken advantage of by your family. I remember watching a video online. This is different. of this woman who this guy and girl, and this woman was saying something like, you got to pay for me, you got to pay for all my girlfriends, nobody wants to deal with a broke ass nigga. And that's what happens, really, like, where sometimes the person who makes the money has to be in the role of paying for everybody, and sometimes it's bad because it can translate to sometimes male gender roles. The man pays for everything, or the person who's working, the youngest person who has a good check, has to pay for the family. Really, it's almost like in The Sopranos, where I think Christopher was expected to pay for meals. Really, um, because that was their tradition, really. But sometimes it teaches resentment. Sometimes it teaches, oh well, I'm taken advantage of over and over and over and over and over, really. And some people don't want to be in that role. The next thing that I will say um, about that is another thing that I will say about that is, again, my brother and I were really volatile. So what would have kind of happened if my brother, got emotional and he decided to, overreact, really? Because I know we live in a family of reactions. And I also think the other thing too that was kind of a little bad about this is both me and my brother were diagnosed with autism, and I want to say this, that yes, we both went to therapists. Therapists diagnosed with autism. Technically, we're diagnosed with autism. I feel that's both misdiagnoses, really. I feel it's misdiagnosis because we both came from traumatic experiences. We did not have a good support system. We grew up in a household with a lot of emotional abuse, and like, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. You live through nothing. Like, kind of like a lighter version of Full Metal Jacket. But when you grow up in that type of household, it's like another type of, your family's taking advantage of you. You do this, you do that. I expect this from you. No ifs, ands, or buts, really. Welcome to adulthood. And sometimes, this is one of the reasons why I don't hang out with my father, really, because that was one of the reasons why I had to step away, was because I felt like he was a goddamn control freak. And I also kind of felt that, he was always trying to teach us responsibility and coming of age and new things, but it always felt like a disappointment, always felt like a killjoy, always felt like a letdown, or it always felt like a surprise, fuck you type of thing, really. Oh, you make $4,000 a month. Oh well, now you got to pay for the family. Oh, you make $4,000 a month. You need to stop fucking traveling. You need to start, living on your own, really. Oh well, you need to start looking for a girl. Take out that penis. Make a grandbaby. Because we want grandbabies. You got to date a black girl. Maybe Russell Toddy, because we want you to black your genes, really. When we want you to become a darker African American, we want you to embrace your inner black man by procreating with black girls, because I had some relatives tell me that too. They want me to have sex with black women so I can have black babies, and therefore I can kind of nigger, darken, black, and get back to that African super dark skin, pass the black genetics down. That's for a different story, but I met many people who were like that. Black people are supposed to, part of what I need to do with my family is embrace my black side, and part of that is dating black women and having darker and darker skinned kids. Because people want me to do that for some reason, because I'm not allowed to marry who I want to marry. I have a woman in Vancouver who's Japanese, and if we had kids, we had like a one-time date. She's really into me, but she knows that it's a one-time thing, really. And we're also seeing other people as well, really. But we decided to have a family. My kids may be half Japanese, really. But what am I supposed to do? Be like, oh, I can't have kids with you because my family's telling me I need to breed. I need to breed. I need to create children with other black people, so I can be more and more darker. And be like, hey, no, I'm an African American because I have black kids. That's fucked up. But going back to it, going back to it, when you try to teach people more responsibility, it should not feel like a letdown, or it should not feel like, well, surprise, I expect this, I expect that, really. And I also understand too that it's okay to say, what, I think these are kind of like conversations that should have been done in a different way. And I really think that's kind of like the issue with my dad. I think a lot of these were like, what, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to sound off as criticizing, kind of come off as undermining. And then the other issue is that my dad worked for the state of Connecticut. He made over $150,000. They publish your salaries. So why is this man who is in his 50s at the time asking his sons who possibly make, like $50,000 a year each, why is he asking us to pay when he actually makes more money than both of us? And he's also a state employee, so we all know state employees, sit on their asses most of the time, really. Especially the more up you go, the more sitting on your ass time you have, really. So why are you kind of putting it on us, really? Shouldn't it be on you, really? Because you make more money than us. So it's kind of interesting when we try to talk about hierarchy and preparing people, and how the older generation kind of does a really bad job with it. Because I think a lot of times what I'm inheriting is not responsibility. I'm inheriting disappointment. I'm inheriting resentment. I'm inheriting, oh well, you know what? You have to selfishly sacrifice yourself for others. And I think like that's also an issue I've had with my family. That a lot of times my family is very very selfish. Really, I've kind of said too that I live with my brother really, but yesterday, he was making himself brownies with walnuts. So I needed to sleep, but he took a hammer and he was starting to smash the walnuts, wake me up, turn on the mixer, and he's not gonna let me sleep. He's not gonna be like, well, I'm gonna wait 3 or 4 days. I'm going to have to wait a couple of days for my brownies because you have to sleep. Fuck you. That's how my brother is really. So many times my family's like that. When I need something, fuck you, Byron. Or I remember, like, and I'll talk about this in another video, that many times I paid for my field trips because my parents would be bitching about how expensive it is or how ridiculous the school's doing fun activities. So my dad made over $150,000, but sometimes I would take my birthday money and I would be paying, and I'll be giving money to the teacher, and sometimes I'll say, hey, I'm paying for it because my dad just bitches, about things. So when you kind of come from that environment of selfish people, providers that just complain a lot, or like I told you guys, the time that on $20 bill, if I spent more than $5 at it at McDonald's, the time that I got a $20 bill from my dad, and if I spent more than $5 on it at McDonald's, he was gonna just my hand, type of thing, really. So when you are in situations where you're told, okay, now you have to be giving, now you have to go out and wait your way for your family, you're gonna be resentful. And there's other things like that. Like I think I mentioned before, the time that I was in middle school and my younger brother what had behavioral issues. So my dad forced me to babysit him, and was like, forced me to babysit him. A kid who was diagnosed with autism, not really appropriate, really. Like a 12, like a 14-year-old looking out for like a 8-year-old with behavioral issues. And then he's saying, "Oh well, I don't mind." Or the time, like I said, where my dad would be drinking all the milk in the house, and he would be forcing me and my brother to walk 6 miles to and from the store in over 100-degree weather, to get milk. Or when my little brother would say, "Can Byron play with me?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to. I just want to be left alone." Or I just worked a full shift at my job, and my dad's like, "Oh sure, Byron's going to play with him. Byron, play with your little brother. Okay, okay, okay." And that kind of taught my little brother, don't even ask Byron, ask my parents, and then my parents will say sure, Byron will do this, Byron will do that. So when you come from that environment of, I have to bend backwards for my family, I have to deal with their selfishness, I need to be patient when they're selfish, I need to do everything for them, really, and now they're expecting me to do something for them, it just doesn't even out, really. It doesn't really even out. It makes me afraid of my family. Like as I said, my little brother who's now 29 years old has a family. What's going to happen when he decides to have a baby? Really, am I supposed to get a new apartment, have a pin, be like, hey, I'm going to take care of your kid for a weekend? Or my biological mother has mental health issues, and I'm not talking to her in over 30 years. She was massively abusive. She beat my older brother with a glass bottle. She's destroyed a couple of families when she got remarried or whatever. Oh, well, I need to be like, okay, you know what, Rose, Mama Rose, you got to move in, you got to come live with me. I got to change my work hours and take care of you until you die, really. When you die, I got to spend money on a funeral for you. No, no, no. The bitch is gonna. I don't care about the bitch, and no, because he was a horrible person. He killed a couple of her children. Um, yeah, you can't have sympathy for a person like that. Fuck her. She dies in the street. She dies in the street. She's becomes state custody and put in a psych ward until the day she dies. You know what? So be it. So be it. So be it. So be it. Doesn't deserve. Doesn't deserve. Didn't give people. Did hurt so many people. You don't deserve a happy ending, really. But the point of it sticks, really. If you can't teach saving money, if you can't teach that you should spend money on family, if you can't teach, well, part of being a family member is treating the family, or surprise, you know what, instead of going to San Francisco, you got to cancel that trip because you got to spend a few $100s on the family or whatever, it's going to teach more resentment. But my dad could have said, you know what, hey, maybe a few weeks beforehand, you can say, hey, you know what, guys, this is what I expect. And I feel like, I want to give you guys responsibility. So we're a little bit prepared, and we got to say, hey, well, how do you guys feel about this? That's kind of more appropriate than just throwing people on the spot and being like, you do this, you do that. Or my grandmother paid the bill and said, you know what, shut up, Rick. And then my dad kind of looked at us with a dorky face, really, because he didn't get his way, really. And that's one of the reasons why, I don't celebrate Father's Day with my parents or other things like that, because more than likely they're going to say, hey, Byron makes $90,000. Oh, well, in order to prepare him for the real world, he's got to cover the $500 bill, really. And by the way, when I went to restaurants as a kid, I prayed to God that I was able to order dessert, really. But more than likely, those order desserts and extra drinks and whatever, because they know that I'm paying for it, So I've also learned that too. My dad taught me that very well, and I appreciate that. Is that when other people are paying, you don't take advantage. Or I remember one time I had a friend Sal who, not really my friend, he was a fake friend, but at the time I thought he was my friend. I went to a restaurant, bought like $50 worth of food, and then I said, "Hey man, I was really hungry. I'm paying for it because I bought a little too much. Really, I just want to be respectful." But I know that don't take advantage of others. But it's okay to teach responsibility. It's okay to teach responsibility, but it's okay to teach responsibility, but you have to do it in a way that does feel kind of like you're teaching, you're encouraging, not like do this, do that, and it feels like force, or like, you know what, I'm gonna like lose my shit, or I'm gonna have a adult temper tantrum if my kids just don't do what I'm asking them for. And when you treat kids in their 20s like they're to be bossed around, or they're expected to do this thing, that thing, really, you're not going to raise responsible children. You're going to raise children with resentment, and that's kind of why I live with my brother, and I'm not talking to my dad in over 20 years, really, because I need to feel like I'm in control. I need to feel like I'm in control. I need to feel like I can do whatever the hell I want, really, because I'm a grown ass man. I'm not a little kid. That can be bossed around, really, because I know what it's like to feel like I have no voice. I have to feel like I have no free will. I know what it's like to feel like, oh well, what, everybody says, what, Byron thinks this way, Byron will do this, Byron will do that, really. I know it's like that people openly disrespect me, and family members call me a nigger, family members disrespect me, and feel like almost like I was like a slave, really, or like a house slave, where I had to sit there and be quiet and everybody says do this, do that, really. So, well, that's kind of like, this is all kind of like extension of those types of feelings of, don't force me, don't never ever force me to do what, never ever tell me to do, never ever force me to do things I don't want to do, because I've lived an entire life of, Byron has to do this, Byron has to do that. I will intimidate Byron into doing this and that, really. It doesn't teach. It teaches me to walk away so I can get my way instead of being with family.